Hey there YouTube, Chemistry Tutors here. This is the first series of Introduction to Chemistry, and this is the episode Writing Ionic Formula. This is an ion table. You might get these in your exams, but it's always a good idea to remember each of these ions and the name of these ions. You might want to take a screenshot, or you might have an ion table already prepared. When you're reading ionic formula, we can use the symbol of the element on the periodic table to represent the element. The subscript on the formula represents the number of atoms which are in that compound. For example, in CaF2, there is a subscript next to the fluorine, so there are 2 fluorine atoms in this compound. If the symbol has no number, it means that there is only one type of that atom. For example, in CaF2, there is no number next to calcium, so there is only 1 calcium atom to every 2 atoms of fluorine. You try. Try and count the number of atoms in each of these compounds. Pause the video and check your work with the answers next. When you're writing the symbol for ions, first we need to practice how to predict the type of charge on the ion's form. Some rules are: number 1, assign the electron configuration to the element. You might want to go back to the atomic structure episode if you haven't already seen it. 2, identify the number of valence electrons the element has. The valence electrons are the outer electrons. Number 3, add or subtract electrons to gain a complete outer shell. You do the simplest. So, for example, gaining 2 electrons is easier than losing 6. 4, figure out the charge on the atom. It's protons minus the electrons for its ion. This equals the charge on the ion. For 5, add the charge and the value of the charge as a superscript to the element. For example, what charge will magnesium ions form? Number 1, the electron configuration is 282. There are 2 electrons in the valence shell. Magnesium is most likely to lose 2 electrons rather than gain 6. 12 protons minus 10 electrons equals a 2 plus charge. The answer is Mg2+. Example 2. What charge will nitrogen ions form? Well, the 2 electron configuration for nitrogen is 2, 5. There are 5 electrons in the outer shell. Nitrogen will gain 3 electrons rather than lose 5. 7 protons minus 10 electrons equals a 3 minus charge. Hence N3 minus. You try. Write ion symbols for each of these elements. Pause the video and check your answers when you are finished. Writing ionic formula. I use, and many people use, the swap and drop method. And we use this to write down the ionic formula for the first 20 elements. Rules. Number 1, take your metal and non-metal and write the elemental ion symbols. Number 2, swap the charges for both ions. Number 3, drop the charges to make them subscripts and remove the charges to make the formula. Note: if both ions have the same charge value, then cancel to leave 1. Example: write the formula for calcium and chlorine. Calcium forms Ca2 plus ions, and chlorine forms Cl minus ions. Calcium and chloride, you swap the charges, so Ca minus and Cl2 plus. Drop to make them subscripts and remove the charges. The final formula is CaCl2. Example 2, sodium and sulfur. In the end, the formula for sodium and sulfur is Na2S. Number 3, aluminium and nitrogen. The final formula for aluminium and nitrogen is AlN. Remember, Al and N both have the same value on the charges, so they cancel to leave 1. You try. Write the formula for these ionic compounds. Pause the video and check your answers when you have finished. Some elements such as copper and iron form more than one type of ion. Iron forms Fe2+, and Fe3+. Copper forms Cu+, and Cu2+. Polyatomic ions. Some ions have more than one type of atom. These are polyatomic ions. Some examples include the nitrate ion, hydroxide, sulfate, phosphate, carbonate, hydrogen carbonate, iodate, hypochlorite, and ammonium. Writing the formula for ionic compounds with polyatomic ions. The formula for ionic compounds with a polyatomic ion can be found using the same method as for finding the formula for ones without. Brackets should be put around any polyatomic ion when more than one of those polyatomic ions are used. For example, copper-2 nitrate. The ion for copper, in this case, is Cu2+, and there's nitrate, and it's NO3-. When you use the swap and drop method, you find out you need 2 nitrates. Therefore, we put a bracket around around the nitrate. We put a 2 after it. Since the formula for copper nitrate is Cu bracket NO3 bracket 2. Example, calcium iodate. And the formula for calcium iodate is Ca bracket IO3 bracket 2. For aluminium sulfate, it's Al2 bracket SO4 bracket 3.